choose life. Choose to be one of those who ends up at a good place in the story God has written. Look at what King Solomon writes. Commit to the Lord whatever you do, and he will establish your plans. And so again, when you choose to follow God, he will establish your plans and your purpose so that you end up in a good place in his story. But look at what it says in the next verse. The Lord has made all for himself. Yes, even the wicked for the day of doom. And so even the wicked are a part of God's story. But they are, you could say, the antagonists. And so we know how they will end. And Paul breaks this down even further by comparing God to a potter. And he says basically that there are some people who are prepared for good and others prepared for destruction. And I know, that's not an easy message, but Paul knew this. And so let's look at what he says. Romans 9. Does not the potter have the right to make out of the same lump of clay some pottery for special purposes and some for common use? What if God, although choosing to show his wrath and make his power known, bore with great patience the objects of his wrath, prepared for destruction? What if he did this to make the riches of his glory known to the objects of his mercy, whom he prepared in advance for glory? You see, those who choose to follow Christ are literally choosing to be the objects of mercy in God's story. Those who don't follow him are making the choice of being the objects of his wrath. And so even though God has written a story that we are all trapped within, except for him because he wrote the timeline, he does allow for us to choose the character we want to be. I don't know how else to say it. And so one point Paul makes here is that God created, or you could say ordained, for some to become what? Objects of his glory. And he prepared those individuals in advance for glory. And so if you get to choose, I think any sensible person who is hearing this would say, follow me. Yes, I want to be an object of his glory. Of course. And Paul speaks more about this when he is writing to Timothy. And he compares God again to a creator who has created some objects for good purposes and some for not good purposes. And then Paul explains how we get to choose what objects we want to be in life. 2 Timothy 2. The Lord knows those who are his. Let everyone who names the name of the Lord depart from iniquity. Now in a great house, there are not only vessels of gold and silver, but also of wood and clay, some for honorable use, some for dishonorable. And here it is. Therefore, if anyone cleanses himself from what is dishonorable, then he will be a vessel for honorable use, set apart as holy and useful to the master of the house, ready for any good work. So flee youthful passions and pursue at righteousness, faith, love, and peace, along with those who call on the name of the Lord from a pure heart. And so he says, if you want to be one of those honorable vessels, an object in God's story used for a good work for the master of the house, if you want that for yourself, if you want to be that, he says, depart from iniquity, flee sin, and pursue righteousness. And someone watching this may be thinking, well, how can I know that I'm one of the honorable vessels God has chosen? How can I know if I am one of his good objects? Well, if you're watching this video, you're obviously pursuing righteousness. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You see, there are people out there who would not dare think of watching a video about God except to make fun of it. But you are seeking him. So don't worry about not being chosen for a good purpose, because you're seeking God right now. And that's a sign right there that you are one of his honorable vessels and that you are one of those in his story who will have a good end. You are choosing to be a part of the good plan. The Pharisees, they chose to be in God's plan as well, but they ended up choosing to be on the bad side. You see how it connects? And so the people who are not a part of God's good plan are those who reject him. The ones who have heard the gospel and make fun of it and have no desire